Okay, it sounds like we don't have any announcements this week, so let's move on to the issues that were tagged for the agenda. The first one is replace unsupported versions of Windows Runtime Exit 33108. I'm just going to take a look at who added that to the issue.
I think it can be bundled with the issue right after it as well. I think they're kind of, one's a pull request and one's an issue, I think.
Yep, you're right. I think those are both. I did look in earlier this week and saw there was still some good conversation going on. Let's see who added it to agenda just in case. So I guess it was Anna added it to the agenda. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to that one. I'm just scrolling down to the bottom. I think one key thing is Joao did open a alternative, which basically uses an environment variable to disable the check, I believe. And it seems like there's some consensus around that, if not complete yet. Still some questions going back and forth. But that sort of seems where it seems where it is right now. Does anybody have anything they want to add?
I'm content to let this go another week.
Okay. Yeah, it seems to me like there's still conversation going on, possible sort of consensus heading towards something there. So, okay. I'll just take that note. Active. Okay, unless anybody else has anything on that, we'll move on to the next issue. This is process throw exception on -- unhandled rejections equals default, which is issue 33021. I don't know if anybody wants to jump into that one. I do know I took a peek at it earlier as well, and there seems to be ongoing discussion. And I think my understanding is we wanted to put together an actual survey, which is being worked on. And
Matthias is working on it, right?
Yeah.
And he's here.
Yeah, Matthias, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I drafted a survey and started a pull request on the TSC repo. I got some feedback so far. Addressed most of those. Got some other feedback yesterday and today. I think we are close to a survey that we can distribute. There's only a few questions that we need to resolve before finishing the survey. I'm just not sure, once we have the questions, how do we share the survey? Do we pass it to the foundation?
Yeah, we can go, like Joe Seppi has kind of taken, I think, ownership of helping out with getting those launched. So I think if we go and talk to him, there may even be a survey at the OpenJS Foundation repo. I can't remember if we did that or just left it with some of the other repos, but I think either opening an issue or talking to Joe, we can take the survey to the next step once we have the questions.
Okay.
So maybe, I'm happy to help with that. Once you have the set of questions, let me know and I can help figure out how we get it going.
Yeah, hopefully we will have a survey ready for, at least the questions ready before the next meeting, I think.
Okay. I guess the only question is, do we leave this on the agenda while we work through this? Or if we're going to do a survey and it's going to take longer, do we take it off the agenda until that survey is complete? What do people think?
I think we should leave it on the agenda. This is important enough that yeah, we should touch on this every week, I think, until we get a resolution. And I think it's important to know that the survey is not a vote. The survey is data. And there are a lot of other, and we very well might decide that even though most people say they want behavior X, we want behavior Y.
Right.
And,
No, it's absolutely data in that, we'll get some subset of the ecosystem commenting, and we just need to use that as input to this decision. It's not the decision itself. Okay, yeah, so I thought I'd check, but leaving it on makes sense. Anything more we want to talk about that one before we move on? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next issue, which is HTTP aligned with stream writable. It is 3181. I think, Rich, is this the one that you tagged for a vote in the issue effectively? Yes, it is, I think. So I can see we currently have 8 thumbs up and 1 not yet formed a decision.
And that is not enough to come to a decision. So I think we need to
Yeah, there's no
push
abstains or
people to express
neutrality.
an opinion or to decide that they don't care one way or the other about this. Let's hear it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And there's no opposition.
That's true. It's, I guess actually it depends whether we're, well, but this is, we need a vote because there is, this is about whether, because we're overriding an objection from Brian White, are we not?
Right, I'm just gonna have to go back and look at the governance to say, do we need a vote or do we need TSC consensus?
I'm
to
pretty
override it?
sure we need a vote, but let me check right now.
Yeah.
I mean, also while I'm at it, let me find out how many TSC members there are. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I think it's going to be 21, but it's good that you count as well.
Yes, it is 21. Thank you. So yeah, all right. And if someone else beats me to the, do we need to vote or not? If a collaborator opposes a proposed change, then the change cannot land. The exception is if the TSC votes to approve the change despite the opposition.
Okay.
So we do need to vote if we're following the letter of our governance document,
Right.
which I believe we should do.
Of course we should.
So if there's anybody here who hasn't expressed an opinion and has one, including if that opinion is, I will not be having an opinion, that would be really awesome. Sam is asking if it's 3. No, Sam, it's not 3.3. It's not that one that we need to vote on. It's 31818, which is aligning HTTP with stream writable.
Yeah, and we need a simple majority.
Yes, we need as little as 3 more votes will do it, depending on what those votes are. As little as 2 more votes will do it.
2 more votes we could do. That's right. Or
anyway,
even some. I think some abstentions would that.
Yeah. So I propose we don't need to talk about this now, but let's leave it on the agenda. Hopefully we can take it off.
I'll abstain if that helps.
I'm sorry, what's that, Tobias?
I'll abstain from the vote.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And actually, we just got 2 more abstentions, so including Tobias, it's 9 yes, 4 abstentions, and nothing else. So it passes. It can land, and I will remove it from the. I'll untag it from the agenda. I'll put the vote result in the minutes document, and I will leave a comment in the pull request. So you can move on to the next item while I do those things, and that should do it.
Okay, sounds good. Great, thanks everybody. Okay, so the next issue is nominations for TSC chair. The nominations closed. I was the only volunteer. In the issue itself, I did ask if, we still need, I thought, some confirmation that either, people are happy that I can continue either through a vote or through some public issue. I see there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people who said +1. I don't know if how we we close on, what's good enough to just say we're done.
I think that's good enough. If somebody felt otherwise, they've had ample opportunity to say so.
Okay, so maybe I'll leave it till Friday, and if there's no objections, I'll close it out. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the next issue. Node.js future directions, any interest, online, person, or summit. I did outline a few of the potential options in the issue that I'd added to the issue last time. I'm just looking to see if we've had much more input since then. I see 5 people sort of plus one. Matthias's comment about planning a retrospective session in the OpenJS, and then decide from there, or plan the retrospective session, an initial forward-looking session in the OpenJS World Summit, and then plan for 2-hour sessions after that. I guess I would say let's plan for that. It sounds like there's at least some support for planning for the summit, and if everybody agrees or there's no objections, I'll go ahead and propose that for the summit. And then, from that, we can kind of decide the next steps. Does that sound good to people? Any objections, I guess? If there aren't any, then I'll assume yes and move forward. Okay, since I don't hear anybody objecting, I'll move forward with that. The next issue on the agenda is audit Google account access, number 389. This one, I think, Rich, you tagged for the agenda.
I'm sorry, I'm still typing the comments.
Okay.
What is this one that we're on now?
This is audit the Google account access, number 389.
Oh yeah, I just think that someone left this is something that should be done, and I'm not sure who should do it, but it should be somebody's responsibility to do this like once a year or something.
I noticed that Brian Warner is on the call as an attendee, and perhaps he is someone who can help with something like auditing the Google Access list. Or are you imagining, Rich, that it should be someone from the project?
Doesn't matter. Hey, can you promote Brian?
Yep, I'm just doing that. I was looking for him.
Miles, I don't care who does it. I just want to make sure somebody is doing it, and that's all. Yeah.
I don't know, Brian, if you heard Miles' question. He was asking if you would be, or somebody at the foundation would be available to do the audit of the Google account access.
Yeah, definitely. We have a variety of accounts that this could be referring to. There's live streaming on the channel, which I think I have access to. There's also the original G Suite account that was used for Node Foundation. Do you have a particular one that you have in mind here?
I think we would say all.
Okay.
Maybe why don't we just tag Brian? Why don't we tag Brian in that issue, and then we can pick up the conversation in that issue? Because this is actually something that ComCom also has to weigh in on, and so might as well just have it in the issue.
Yeah, it's a good point, Rich. And there are a lot of people who are who have permissions who may or may not be involved anymore. So glad you brought this
Ruben
up.
needs to be promoted.
Doing it. Okay. So I tagged you, Brian, saying, Brian Warner volunteered to take this on if we want the foundation to take it on. If nobody has any concerns here, should we basically, is it that we assume the TSC is okay with that and we should just ask the ComCom with that they're okay with that? Does that make sense? I'm going to assume silence is yes, so I'll type that in. So basically, at CC the community committee in that issue so they can comment, and we'll assume the TSC is okay with that unless anybody raises some concerns.
you have a preference on? Would you like me to ask TSC and ComCom to let me know who should be stricken from the list, or do you have another preferred process for doing this sort of audit?
We've never done it before, so we're trying to figure out the process.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, I think just sending the list, do we think we'll get enough response if we send the list out? It might be good to be a little bit more active.
I think it can be discussed in the issue, but I have a feeling that like
Yeah.
if it's really honestly, if it's just like I bet that this can be resolved with like the chair of the TSC, the chair of ComCom, and Brian just sort of like Brian emails out, here's everybody who's on it, mark off all the people who you recognize,
Right.
and then whoever's left, then we just distribute the whoever's left list to the entire TSC and ComCom in case you're missing somebody, and then off it goes. Something like that. I'm making this up as I go along, obviously.
Yep, sounds good. I'm just documenting a comment on this issue.
Okay, yeah, if I was about to do that, but if you're capturing that, yeah, because I think something like that, Brian Foundation person has got the ball for making sure it happens, can send out the list to the two chairs who can probably filter it pretty well, and then that's the last pass by the other two groups will work pretty well. Okay. Here, discussion will continue in issue. Okay. So thank you to the people who've already transferred some of the comments into the strategic initiatives section. I don't know, Michael, if you have anything you want to add to the V8 currency one.
Well, no. So V8 8.3 is ready to land. CI is green. We are just waiting for it to be stable upstream.
Is there any plans? Is that then going to go back to 14? I assume. I mean, it needs to land in master, of course.
Yeah,
but...
yeah. We plan to try and backport it to 14, but that's the PR now is just for master.
Okay, great. Okay, moving on to the next one, which was promises. Mateo's not here, but he did comment add a couple comments. That there's some discussion around the Venable and async local storage in Node.js Node 33.189. That one is an interesting one. It would be good for TSC members to go take a look at in terms of, the Venables do pose a challenge in maintaining context in async hooks. And then the other one he mentioned is that promise hooks used by async hooks are going to get faster in Node.js. And I think that's assuming that you don't turn on the destroy hook. But that's a good piece of performance work that Cord is doing to help move that forward. Any questions or other things people want to add on that one? Okay, moving on to build resources. So we have gotten some info from a provincial provider. I did sync with Robin, actually, since I wrote this up. The number that was quoted is substantial enough that, if we were going to do that, we would need to do some additional fundraising. And so that's something that Robin's going to think about, work on over the next little while, but I don't think we're going to, it's not like we'll find out next week, or this is more of a month's kind of thing where that's going to have to be worked on. Any questions on that before we move over to the next one? If not, then quick says no updates this week, but quick work on progress on separating bits out that can be separated out. Any other of the strategic initiatives that are people here that would like to add in an update on?
Yeah, I can give a quick modules update. So we've landed the unflagging of modules on 12.x staging with the intent of it going out in 12.17 later this month. The release team met and discussed it today. Richard brought up a really valid point that would be good just for folks to be aware of, that, you know, the flag being removed, which we did do on 13, does potentially change how code executes. So if someone was using a module that has both a main and an exports field, once we unflag ESM by default, they will be using the export field because it shadows main. Now, I had discussed this with a couple folks at Node+JS Interactive in December, and the general sentiment that I got from a few people was that this was tolerable risk, that if folks were broken by something like this, it's because of a feature that has been adopted in a downstream package. Any Semver minor that we introduce has the risk of breaking people if folks are adopting these features, and that if modules wanted to fix this, you know, changing the way in which exports work, if like the module would have had to have introduced a Semver major change in the way in which they're using exports in order to break people, and that can be fixed. Now, one of the things that we did talk about as a potential escape hatch to this would be introducing a new flag to disable package exports. We talked about whether or not this was something that should be considered on all release lines, or if it's something that we should consider only on 12, or if perhaps we shouldn't do it at all. I think that the general sentiment was that we're not seeing, at least at large, a big call for a feature like this on 14. And as such, kind of like introducing something like this does run the risk of kind of bifurcating the way in which people are writing modules and consuming them. Similarly, on 12, well, we could introduce a feature like this. It would feel imbalanced or inconsistent if it was an escape hatch that was only on 12, but not available on other versions. Where the release team left it, and you know, open for discussion and debate here if people feel differently, was that we want to move forward with unflagging it on 12, recognizing that there is risk, but we do believe that that risk is minimal, tolerable, and fixable outside of core. So if things are broken, they can be fixed in the modules that are causing these problems. They don't require changes to Node.js core. That if we have been off on the degree to which breakage occurs, that we in short order can introduce a new flag to disable exports and ship that in a patch release or in a minor release. But that basically we didn't want to preemptively add this escape hatch if there isn't a need for it. I see Rich's comment about a conflicting meeting, and I'm glad that it's a conflicting meeting, not a conflicting feeling.
Yeah. So I guess the feeling is the belief is that there's a very, very small chance this will actually affect people.
That's my thought. Like most people who are shipping, like very few people have adopted package exports. There is a growing adoption list of which Guy Bedford has been keeping track of how many modules have been. It's not trivial, but it's not like a massive percentage of the ecosystem. The projects that are adopting it tend to be more bleeding edge projects that are trying out new experimental features. And those are ones that tend to have more velocity. So if we think about this in comparison to like the buffer deprecation, which was very disruptive for module authors, this isn't like we're changing the way in which something works for very old modules. Anything that hasn't been touched in years will be absolutely unaffected by this. As long as you have a main entry point and no exports, your modules will continue to work exactly the same way as they worked before. The only modules affected by this would be modules that have adopted the new interfaces for offering ESM support, or using package exports to limit the public interface of CommonJS packages.
Okay, I guess my next question was going to be, and normally that should just work, right? I guess, unless people are using things that they hadn't intended.
Yeah, so what we have seen happen in the ecosystem a few times since we removed the warning was people being unaware that exports would lock down all of your deep imports and deep requires. And that kind of caught people by surprise. There's also some issues with like, basically most of the major concerns that have happened, we've improved the documentation and the errors over the last 2 weeks to a point where I think it's much better, and we'll be backporting a lot of that stuff to 12 prior to it going out. I personally think the risk is tolerable, but I also think it's absolutely reasonable for folks to kind of call this into question or have concerns about it. But to be clear, ESM itself does not change anything. Main still works the exact way main works. The feature that actually potentially causes the issue is the introduction of exports and the fact that exports replace main. So if you have main and exports in a module, and you were on a version of Node that didn't support exports, and then in a Semver minor we enabled exports, the same module will behave differently between those two versions of Node because the new feature is there.
Right, and it's I just picked up, you said there have been a number of problems with 14 in this respect, or
not a number. There have been a couple of people, like there was the Is Promise release that went out and broke a lot of people, but the maintainer of Is Promise got a new release out in 2 hours that unbroke people. It wasn't clear that the way in which they were using the feature was a Semver major. So I guess what I mean by that is yes, there are people who have run into issues, but the issues tend to be more on like learning how the feature works, not like there's some module sitting there that I was using and now it's not working. It was like they did a release and they broke a bunch of people. They did another release and fixed them.
right, and they did a release which started taking advantage of the feature versus it being a module that already was using it.
Yeah, they did
and
a
got
release
changed because okay.
They did a release that added the feature to add ESM support in a minor release, but did it in a way that was Semver major. They reverted it and then re-released as a Semver major.
Okay. So that's not the case that we would get with modules that we're working with 12 and then this turns on by default.
I mean, we can go through and audit the list. Guy has it. So we can see which projects, like bigger ones, would potentially be affected by this. But at least from what I've seen in module authors in the ecosystem, they're like either like if they're following semantic versioning, they're either introducing the feature in a way that's non-breaking or they're introducing it in a breaking way in a Semver major change. And I guess the only thing that would happen would be like exports locks down deep imports. So if you were like relying on a deep import in a module, the only way that it would be breaking for you would be if that was the module author's intent.
Right. Yeah, they'd made that choice, but it wasn't enforced until now.
Yeah. So, and it's not being super widely used. So it is complicated. Yes, it could break people's experiences, but the only time where it will break experience would be either A, where a module author has made a mistake and it's relatively easy to correct that, or when it is enforcing an interface that the module author wanted to enforce, but it was unable to previously enforce.
Anybody have any more questions or suggestions, discussion before we move on? Okay, let's move on. I think that's the end, unless, does anybody else have any other update on the strategic initiatives they'd like to give? If not, let's call the public part of the meeting to a close. I will turn off the live stream if everybody can stick around.